This is Back to Back.
Yo, what's up, back-to-backers? This is Willy Joy. Welcome to the show. This is Back to Back. This is my podcast. You're listening to it. How are you? How we feeling out there? How we doing? Middle of December, only a couple weeks left, and then we are officially living in the future. I'm feeling good. The year is wrapping up well. I've got a lot of exciting things to tell you about coming very soon in 2020. But right now, I'm just excited to tell you my guest this week. I've got Gammer on the show. He's somebody I've been wanting to have on for a long time. And man, we just had so much fun. And listen, if you're in Los Angeles, this Saturday, December 14th, Gammer is headlining the Los Angeles Palladium. That's a huge show. He's got a lot planned for it. And we actually talked about this show on the episode you're about to hear. But yeah, man, if you're in LA, you got to go see Gammer. And he actually just got done headlining his first Monstercat tour that went all over the States. That's actually when I ran into him. He's got a bunch of new music out. One thing I love about Gammer is that the song titles just get better and better. He's got a new single out called Bro Step Strikes Back, and he's also got a new tune out with Showtech, and that one is just called EDM Sucks. Which, look, if you've listened to this show before, you know I'm not against holding some people to a higher standard. So you know what? EDM sucks? Yeah, I'm down with it. Gammer's got a great sense of humor. He's one of those artists where I think the personality matches the music, matches the attitude. It all comes together great. I'll tell you a little more about how we met up in a second, but before I do, Back to Back is brought to you today by my friends over at Serato. Can't say enough good things about Serato, man. I talk about them a lot. I like to do it. They have been a true ally to DJs in the game for so many years. I've been using their products to perform for a long time. And now you can actually use their products to produce your music as well, because they just launched the brand new Serato Studio. Serato Studio is a beat-making tool that helps producers simplify the path to creativity. And what that means is that Serato worked really hard to devise ways that will help you get your ideas out and into the computer, into the software, and just out into the world faster and easier. They've had years of experience building software for DJs, and they brought all of that to bear when they made Serato Studio. So the interface is really intuitive. It's going to look familiar to you if you've ever seen anyone DJing with Serato before. The file management is great. They've got their pitch and time algorithm, so it's really easy to just find the sample you want, throw it in, pitch it up, stretch it, whatever you want to do. It's super fast. There's tons of built-in loops, effects, lots of samples that come with it as well. They've got artist sample packs from people like Flostradamus, Just Blaze, Fool's Gold Records, and I've got a special deal for all my producers out there listening to this show. This is only for the listeners. When you go to www.serato.com/studio and start a subscription with Serato Studio, use the code WillyJoy2 at checkout to get 2 free months of the software. That's a lot of time. You can make a lot of songs in 2 months, and after that, honestly, I think you might just want to keep Serato Studio around. So go to serato.com/studio and enter code WillyJoy2 at checkout to get 2 free months off of a subscription to Serato Studio. Serato, love them. Go hit them up. All right, so for this conversation with Gammer, we met up, as I often do, at a hotel room, and I was excited to talk to him. A few of you out there might be able to guess why, because I used to be obsessed with happy hardcore back in the day, and Gammer is one of the happy hardcore legends. You know, I think a lot of people listening to this show might know him for some of his more recent work. You know, he had the smash hit called The Drop a year ago that was at every festival and every show you probably ever went to that year. But before that, he won Best DJ at the Hardcore Heaven Awards, which is kind of like I don't know, the all-stars of happy hardcore. He won that 6 years in a row. He's been super influential in that scene, and it's just one of those things. Those that know. We talk about that a little bit in this conversation you're about to hear. He found out that some people, some pretty big names that you maybe wouldn't expect were big fans. It's a cool moment for him. Well-deserved. And, you know, I always like those stories where kind of the underground legends, the people who are really holding it down for a scene or a sound or a style. I like it when they get their props. I like it when they get to, you know, smell their flowers while they're still around. So it just gets me stoked to see Gammer out here, out touring the U.S., crushing it. And he was just a sweetheart. I really, really enjoyed this conversation. And if you enjoy this conversation and you want to help support Back to Back, help support me and what I'm trying to do here, the best way to help out is to let other people know you're listening. The way we grow is by word of mouth. So look, you want to know what to get me for the holidays? The best present you can get me, man, just tag me in your stories, put up a tweet, let people know you're tuned in if you like what you're hearing. My name is @WillyJoy on all social media, and the show is @BackToBackPod. I'm always going to be replying, reposting. I love talking to everybody out there. There's already such a great community that supports this show. You know, every week it's like I get to come back and hang out with some friends. It's a great feeling. So come on, join the party. And don't forget, you can also reach out to me directly. backtobackpod@gmail.com is the email address. Send me your questions, comments, concerns, people you'd like to see on the show. Whatever you're thinking about, man, we'll talk about it. But for right now, I want to get into this with Gammer. And don't forget, I'm going to put a link in the description of this episode where you can go follow him, keep up to date with all the new music, the tour dates. He's got a lot coming up in 2020. So, without further ado, this is me and Gammer back to back. Let's go. I'm like right now preparing for the first real winter I've lived through in like 6 years, which is not great.
Oh, God. Wow. God bless you and good luck.
Appreciate that. I mean, I feel like as DJs, like as people who sort of live on planes a lot, we get to sort of be like winter tourists, you know?
Yeah.
You can drop in and like sample the winter for a weekend. And
well, unfortunately, I still live in the UK, so it's not that good for me.
Well, how bad do the winters get there?
Not as brutal as they do over, you know, like in Chicago and places like that.
Yeah.
The worst part is the rain. You know, you mix rain and wind, and, you know, at least with the cold, you can get inside and you're warm. But when you go outside and it's absolutely chucking it down and you come in and you're soaking, you're right. Kind of in that, you know?
Yeah, man. And the rain is constant, right? Even in the summer.
Yeah, it's just a part of life, honestly.
Are you in London?
Oh, I wish. No, I live in quite a big town, actually. I live in a place called Northampton. It's about an hour north of London.
Okay. And that's actually, you were born there, right?
Yeah, born and raised. I still live there.
That's cool, man.
Mostly my family's all, you know, I thought about doing the whole move to LA thing, but I just, you know, I'm a real family man and I just can't leave them behind, you know.
I've never done the full-time living in LA despite being in the music industry for, you know, a super long time. And it's one of those weird things. I don't know if you relate to this, but it's, you know, there's always that sort of weird external pressure of like, oh, well, why haven't you moved to LA yet? You know, why you should just come to LA. That's what everybody does. And
everybody says that. I mean, I've got loads of friends in LA, and they're all like, hey, you moved to LA. Why? So I can live there. We can basically never see each other because none of us want to deal with the traffic.
Basically, yeah. I like to go to LA for a week, maybe 2 weeks on the outside, just fill up every day, knock shit out. That's LA is better for me that way.
I had my first real downtown experience recently. I stayed in an Airbnb down there.
Airbnb
wonderful.
Downtown.
Yeah, Airbnb was wonderful.
Okay.
Anything outside the door to that Airbnb was not so great.
Dude, downtown LA, it's funny because I remember there was this like shift maybe 10 years ago where all the American DJs who were in New York, everybody moved to LA. And a lot of the European guys started moving there too, just when everybody started collecting in LA. And everyone was moving downtown. That was like the first neighborhood that really got colonized by DJs.
Yeah.
And so in my mind, I was like, well, downtown, it must be the best part of LA.
No, I fully agree with you. LA's a vibe, for better or for worse.
Yeah, absolutely. But I like that you're still just keeping it real at home, man. Do you feel like that helps you sort of maintain, stay rooted? Is it nice to come home to like a quieter, familiar place?
I mean, it's been a real journey for me over the last couple of years. It is tricky getting the work-life balance thing sort of nailed down. But one thing I do like about when I go home, because I got like 2 daughters at home as well. So when I get home, it helps me completely separate myself as the artist from myself as the person. You know, when I'm out on the road, it's all, it's all haircuts and trim beards and nice clothes. I go home and dude, it's like tea, slippers, dressing gowns, like my beard and my hair. No one sees it. Like my beard and my hair grows out and I go complete full dad mode. I'm at the bus stop with all the other mums and dads asking about, the weather and, what's your stance on Brexit and the economy and stuff like that.
Oh, man.
And it's so weird because some of them know what I do. They're like, oh, you're a DJ, aren't you? My kid's having a birthday party. Do you want to come DJ? I'm like, you are not.
Yeah,
no, you're not ready for what I would play.
You don't want me to DJ your kid's birthday party.
Absolutely not.
That's great, man. I'm the same way because I'm a real homebody when I'm at home. You know, I'm not going out every night, nothing like that. And it's so funny you mentioned, the beard and the clothes and all that. Sometimes I'll realize like I can't even make a social media post just because I look too decrepit, Like if I've had a solid couple weeks at home in the studio, whatever, just chilling.
You gotta take all your selfies in advance and have them ready.
Yeah, absolutely, man. You got to put them in the vault.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's so funny. Well, and I think both of us, I don't know exactly how old you are, but I think we're from the same approximate generation. And when we started doing this, I mean, something like social media posts and thinking about that as a component of your career, I mean, it didn't even exist. Right?
No, man, this is how crazy it is. When I started, you'd make a song, you'd press it to vinyl, and somehow people would just buy it.
Right.
Like, with no promotion. The only promotion is, I think, like 10 test pressings would go out to certain people. And maybe they'd get sold in a record shop or something. But that was it. People would go to raves, hear the songs, and just... I mean, even me, I'd go down the record shop every Saturday and just flick through like the happy hardcore section and just see what was going on. And
oh man, I mean, I have these very clear memories when I was about, I think 15. My parents bought me a set of turntables, and I was really excited. And I had one other friend who was kind of on the same wavelength, and we got together. And we went to the record store, and this is one of the reasons I'm really excited to talk to you is because happy hardcore was like my first love in electronic music.
No way.
And I was a happy hardcore DJ for like the first few years I was DJing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And my memory is of me and my friend going to the record store and basically just buying out the happy hardcore section. This was in Minneapolis in the late 90s. So, there wasn't much of a section.
I remember like America was always like the untapped market for that. I know a friend of mine he'd always had to hook up with the record shops over in America, and he'd send them all the records for them to sell because from what I know, it was just way harder to get the music over here than it was in the UK.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Yeah, it was much harder. I mean, I remember going into my college years is when I found out about the mail order stores. You could just, hit up the people in the UK directly. Yeah. And then, my college mailroom must have looked at me so crazy because every week it was these big cardboard packages from, the UK or the Netherlands. And, it was
good times, man.
It was
simple times.
Well, here's what I wanted to say is that maybe this is one of the advantages we had back when everything was a lot smaller is that I think there's this passion, right? When it's underground and when it's sort of a secret that you share with this small group of people. And for you to say, you just put the record out and somehow people bought it. I think when a scene is underground, when it's smaller, when it's really the only people there are the people who are so passionate about it, that's exciting to me, because then those people, you don't even have to promote, really. They're just so excited. If there is something new, they're already going to be checking, right?
Yeah.
And to me, there was something special about that late 90s, early 2000s hardcore scene. I'm sure it was very different in the UK, but in the US, I mean, it was such a tiny community that you kind of knew everybody. Everyone was really excited about, every little detail of the scene, every new song.
Well, the UK was honestly like that as well.
Is that right?
Yeah, I started DJing. I guess it was like the final kind of boom of the rave scene. It was from like 2003-4 right up to maybe 2014, 15-ish. And even when like the events were big and pulling like big for us, 5,000 to 10,000 people, it was still a scene. It was still like everybody knows everybody and everyone was passionate. And all the artists we're to this day, we're all still close, and it was just like a community, and there was something special about that. And that is something I miss, not in a, why can't it go back to this kind of way? But obviously that was me growing up and my experience coming into music and DJing.
Of course.
I'll always cherish those years for what they were,
Yeah, there's that nostalgia, and I talk about this on the show all the time, is I think as people who make music, as people who DJ, I have this theory that we're all basically just constantly trying to get back to that first time we heard, whatever song it was for us, or the first event we went to that made us feel that way. At least for me, anytime I sit down to try to make a song, anytime I'm playing a set to other people, it's always really just trying to chase that feeling again.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's the same now as it was then. You can't predict what will go and what won't. I'm sure you've had this. I'm sure every producer's had this, where you spend 2 months on one song, but then the next one that you did in an hour is the one that
In fact, it's almost always the one you do in an hour.
There's a magic that happens when you don't think about it, but if you sat down and tried not to think about it, you'd end up thinking about it. And it's but that's the beauty of music, man. It's just like sometimes everything just, the stars align and something happens, and then that's where the magic is. Yeah,
100%. And that's what's exciting too. And I think why it's hard to get bored doing what we do is sort of that next breakthrough, that next surprise is always around the corner.
Yeah.
Or at least you hope it is.
It's also like harder now just because everything's so accessible. So getting the standout stuff is just like, Porter Robinson's Worlds album is just like, it's up there in my top 3.
Oh yeah, instant
classic.
classic.
It's just amazing. It's incredible. But then you read interviews about what he went through with all of it, because he did that, and then it's like, well, what does he do now? Because he could do more worlds, which is fine, and people would like it. But then it's just more worlds.
Right.
Now, that must be flipping hard to go through.
Well, and then he went and did Virtual Self after that, right?
That's what's amazing. He just came back with this completely different thing, referencing like, the early days of trance that I grew up with. Started this new alias and yet still kind of owned it as Porter Robinson, and
I've talked about him doing that before, and I love to talk about it because it is, if I really try to put myself in his shoes, after the success of Worlds, he's a celebrity DJ at that point. A lot of money is involved. A lot of people are now sort of relying on him, and then to go and make that choice to do Virtual Self, which I'm sure 0 people asked him to do. Like that to me is such a bold, inspirational kind of choice.
That's really doing what you believe in. Yeah,
and it worked, right? Like Virtual Self is now also an extremely popular project. I love the music of it.
And then you're like, well, what comes next? No matter what expectation we have, I hope he completely shatters it.
I know. Fuck, it never ends, man. Now if I try to think about him again, too, it's like, well, fuck, I got to do this again?
I totally get that.
Yeah, I've never met him.
Lovely guy.
Is that true? Maybe I met him once, but I don't know him well. But it does seem like he sort of thrives off of defying expectations a little bit.
But he's the friendliest person I've ever met.
Yeah.
It's like I've met him really formally, like after shows and stuff. I remember one time I was at EDC with one of my friends, and we were just going to get in an Uber, and out he steps from a car, So there's obviously it's like it's EDC week. So obviously, you know, we're all used to doing the, hey mate, how's it going? I'll talk to you in a bit. Hey mate, I've just got to go.
And you never see him again.
He comes up to us, he starts talks our bloody ear off, but like in the nicest way. Just like, I'm like, I'm a really big fan of this. And he like just breaks down what he was thinking. And he's just so humble and friendly. There's not one arrogant bone in his body.
Well, I have to imagine he was probably a fan of yours as well, right?
Quite possibly, yeah. Well, he's referenced like old DJ Brisk and Ham records, which again is another sort of period I grew up with.
Oh man, I mean that Brisk and Ham for me, that was the top
gold
for me. Yeah. Oh man,
Ham is just an exceptional producer. He makes drum and bass now.
Yeah.
Hamilton.
I heard that. I tried to follow up with some of them a few years back and just couldn't keep up. It's what you were saying, man. There's just too much. And to take it back to what we were talking about a second ago, it's a good problem to have. But now with dance music blowing up so much, especially in the States, and all of us being able to have these careers, which is, I feel very lucky. But I do feel like that passion is gone. Now it's so hard to get a single person to pay attention to what you're doing, even for 5 seconds.
Well, this is why. I mean, I'm going to talk about Monstercat for a bit.
Yeah.
One of the reasons I wanted to work with them for so long and why I love working with them is because their community and fan base, for me, shows that passion that I kind of miss from the older days of rave.
That's a good point.
They will follow them. I mean, I've seen guys kicking off when they change the font. That's passion.
You're right. Yeah.
You know?
No, their Reddit is crazy.
Yeah. And they, you know, Monstercat are passionate. Their fans are passionate. I love all their ideas and everything. And anytime I get to release with them, I just love working with them. And I think they have a really good thing going in that regard.
Yeah, they've somehow managed to crack that code and keep that community really strong. Shout out to Sasha if you're listening to this. I love Sasha.
What up, Sash?
How long have you been working with them? Like, when did you start putting out records with them?
When was my first release with them? 2015. 2000, really?
2015.
Apparently 2015, yeah. I mean, I was trying to build a fan base in the US and they were definitely a big stepping stone towards that. It was also amazing because, I mean, like, I have nothing but respect for how particular they are. I'd had so many song rejections from them.
Right.
So I had the email back, which is in the most politest way. No, we don't like this song.
I've gotten the same thing.
Yeah. And when you finally get the release, it's like, yes!
Right.
And I also tell people, like, because I have people tell me, they're not taking anything. I'm like, man, just keep trying because, you know, we've all been there.
Well, and that's such a good lesson in general, right? I mean, step one, if you want to be in this business, you got to learn to deal with rejection.
Exactly.
It's going to happen constantly. It's going to happen way more than acceptance.
And rejection doesn't mean the song is necessarily bad. It just could be the wrong timing. It could be not right for that individual person.
Absolutely.
You know, some of these songs I was playing out and getting a great reaction and even released myself and did really good numbers that Monstercat rejected, and I didn't take that as actually, I think at the time I was a bit like, up yours, Monstercat, you're wrong. But then you learn it's just like, it just wasn't
hard.
for them.
Well, and it's hard, I think, as an artist, of course, your ego is going to be a little tied to the work you make. And so, you know, if somebody says, I don't like it or it isn't for me, it's hard not to take that personally, even if the logical part of my brain knows that you shouldn't take it personally. Well, one thing I did want to touch on, you know, you mentioned when you were trying to break into the US and that they sort of were one of the ways that helped you do that. But it's so interesting to me, you had a whole career, a big career before breaking into the US.
Yeah.
And I'm sort of curious, you know, in that, whatever we want to call it, the first wave, Gammer 1.0.
Pre the drop.
Yeah, basically. You know, what was your relation to the States? Was it possible as sort of a successful, happy hardcore DJ to have much presence in the States at the time? What was that relationship like?
I'd come out and done some shows in the States, but before Calvin Harris and Rihanna, and before Skrillex, rave culture in the States, it wasn't
very different.
What was that thing? What was that thing called? The Rave Act? I don't know. It was always illegal. They always got shut down.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, it was the Rave Act.
So I come for parties. It'd be like I'd be traveling not quite on the right terms, you know, sort of, I'm here for a wedding. And
well, and even the venues, I mean, this is my era too. The venues were illegal half the time.
Yeah.
And you never...
I'm going to be straight up, man. They were kind of weird.
Yeah.
You know, they were, I'd sort of come in and I'm like, what the hell is this? And I did a few, you know, I did some really big parties in Miami, but no one would dance to anything.
Oh, really?
And it was just because literally no one knew what the music is. And I remember speaking to that promoter on the way home to the airport, and he said, he was telling me about guys like a big Australian happy hardcore DJ called Searle, S3RL. Another friend of mine, DJ Ravine, is like, man, start putting mixes on YouTube and SoundCloud, and that's a good way to like build US presence. So I started doing that. The actual transition was just like a cocktail of loads of personal stuff that happened and stuff that happened within sort of the UK hardcore community and the way the music went. But at the time, I was like big in the UK.
Right.
The US side of things, it just didn't really exist, you know?
Yeah.
Do you have any dance music? Didn't I remember like being in an elevator in downtown LA and hearing like Calvin Harris and all this dance music on, and I was looking at my friend like, we never thought dance. There was a time, right? I'm going to go full boomer here.
Oh yeah, let's do it.
There was a time where like dance music did not exist in the US, and it wasn't even that long ago.
Yeah,
you know, just didn't. It was all hip hop and R&B, and that was it.
Oh, I mean, man, when I was in high school, this again, I'm dating myself too, but this is late '90s. When I was in high school, I mean, I was the raver kid in my class. You know, like no, it was not cool to like the music, and not only was it not cool, but I mean, no one even knew what it was.
Nobody knew what it was.
I remember, it's funny you mentioned, you know, parties getting shut down and everything. There was this one rave when I was still in high school, and I had finally convinced this group of like the cool kids to come check out like this thing. I was like, no, you guys trust me. It's going to be great. It's so crazy. And we get there, we stood in line for, I don't know, an hour. And then right as we got to the front of the line, the party got shut down.
Oh.
And they never trusted me ever again. That was raving, man. That's what it was in the States back then.
It was a thing, but it wasn't a thing. You know?
Yeah, it was literally very underground.
Yeah.
And for you, I'm curious, you know, growing up in Northampton, outside of London, what was it like when you were a kid? Like, what was your exposure to dance music, if any?
Mine is a classic 90s tale from rave. My stepbrother gave me a cassette, right? This is how long ago we're talking. He gave me a cassette. It just said Hardcore Heaven, DJ Druid set. And I put it on, and it was like this 180 beat. I would only explain it as like festival music. No, fairground music, like circus music. You know, it had this melody that went na 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 na. And I put it on, and I'm like 11 or 12 or something, and I'm like, this is amazing.
Yeah.
You know, it's just this really fun. It was just completely wacky, and I mean, it was totally bonkers.
Yeah.
But I'd never heard anything like it. So I'm walking around the school listening to this, what I then, you know, came to know as Happy Hardcore. And then someone gave me a CD. It was called Bonkers 6 Mix by Dougal. I started listening to that all the time. And then I found some really weird ones like DJ Speed Freak, which would be like 300 BPM.
Yeah. It got real weird.
Yeah. What was the one song? I'm a loser, baby. Who did that?
Beck.
One? Yeah, I'm a raver, baby. So why don't you kill me? Bum, 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 bum. Felt kind of rebellious too, you know?
No, yeah, absolutely. And there was something for me where it connected with exactly where I was. I was 15. I was an adolescent.
Yeah.
And like hormones were crazy, but I didn't know, you know, like my body was weird. I was like awkward. This is all of it. I was like, yeah, this music, I understand this.
Well, that was rave in general, you know. It always appealed to the kids that didn't quite fit in. And that was another thing I loved about like the early rave scene, is that it was a place for like all us misfits to come together, because I wasn't popular at school.
Right.
And I got bullied and picked on and stuff, but I had my tunes, man.
Yeah. We're not necessarily happy hardcore, but just dance music in general. Did people know what it was, or was that a weird thing for you to be into?
In the UK, dance music like has always, you know, I mean, we're like one of the birthplaces
Right.
of it. So Sandstorm was a number one song, unironically, when it came out. You know, Zombie Nation was a big. It was things like Rank One Airwave, Tiesto was doing the trance stuff, all ATB, all that kind of stuff. It was just,
and that's on the BBC radio, right?
yeah.
Right.
This stuff was like, I remember the big trance boom in 1999, which I was obsessed with. It was just getting played everywhere. We had a show called Top of the Pops where they'd always, or like the top 10 of that week, they'd get the bands in to play it live on TV, and you'd have like the DJ there,
right,
with a singer like just there in the background. What I know now was like pretending to mix, but he's
some
there
of those
playing his
videos.
trance. Yeah,
if you go back, it's on YouTube for anyone listening. If you Google some of those old groups, like Top of the Pops performances, so funny. Were you going to events as a kid too? Well, was the local scene popping?
I was just too young, honestly. During my, I think, second to last year at school, I actually, the guy who found me and taught me how to make music, who is DJ Dougal, as mentioned earlier, I was working with him while I was still in school.
Oh, really?
So some weekends, he'd take me to the events he's playing at. And we had this legendary venue it's in a town called Milton Keynes. We had a venue called The Sanctuary, and there's like little 14, 13, 12-year-old me, whatever, and he brings me to this venue. I'm way underage, but the laws were way more lax. And I'm standing behind him, and it's this absolute sweatbox while he's mixing like these old, badly produced records off vinyl, and all of you couldn't hear the music over the sound of whistles and horns.
Oh, man.
And the MC, and yet it sounded good.
Right.
There was like just a completely unbeatable atmosphere to it, and from then on I was just completely hooked. I'm like, this is what I want to do.
That must have been mind-blowing at that age.
Yeah. And then we left school, and it was cool because I'd go out with him every weekend, and you know, we'd make records in the week, and then I'd watch him playing at the weekend, and through that I learned about production, mix downs, even like he taught me how to DJ as well. And
that's amazing. And so you met him when you were that young, 12, 13?
Yeah, we're like nearly 20 years deep now or something.
That's amazing.
Crazy.
And I mean, we should say, for the people who might not know as much of the hardcore history, I mean, Dougal, a legend in
absolute legend,
hardcore music. I mean, how would you describe it? I feel like I shouldn't even talk about it because that's
I mean,
your
he
friend.
was, you know, a lot of early 90s rave was really dark and techno-y, and I think him, Slipmatt and DJ Vibes were the only ones who sort of came in, started adding like the old sort of Prodigy style piano grooves to it and the pitched up vocals, and you know, kind of stopped it all being serious and brought all they pioneered like the uplifting rave sounds,
cheeky little samples.
Yeah.
That's a good way to put it. And it's amazing because he's still doing it.
Yeah, well, I don't know if it's too soon to say, but I'm actually I'm doing a Palladium show in a month, and I'm actually bringing him out to play a set.
Amazing.
I'm like, only seems fitting, you know, because I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for him. And we're still in, you know, he's an amazing producer. We're still in touch most days.
So how did he find out about you when you were that young?
He worked with a guy who was called TKM or Innovate, and my mum was his ironing lady. So we're sitting there around the table, and someone said something like, "Did you see Dougal today?" And I look up like, "Do you know DJ Dougal? No way." So he took me around his house while he was mixing a Bonkers album. I just sat there like completely like starstruck.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's an incredible connection.
Yeah.
Did your mom know who this person was?
Yeah. My mum was going raving before I even got to producing. Yeah. Back in sort of the earlier days, she'd be front row at my sets. She'd also drive me because I was too young to drive.
How did you kind of make that connection with him? You know, I'm sure he was aware that you were a young kid who loved this kind of music. Was it in your head right away that you wanted to DJ this music? Did you think about that you wanted to make this music?
I definitely, between that and sort of the hard house sound, which was big at the time, I was between the two, and I had a cracked copy of Reason, which was like the first, I guess, like fully involved software workstation. And I was just making these ideas, and I guess my mum was giving him the CDs, and I'm there sitting in this one summer, I'm there sitting in my bedroom, looking like a flipping hermit, windows closed. I'm there playing like Counter-Strike 1.6. And then the door opens and Dougal just is randomly in my bedroom, and he said I looked at him like a rabbit in the headlights. Like I just looked at him and didn't say anything, and he was like, "You're right." You're right. It's like, yeah. And then he just left. And then I went in the kitchen and he's standing there and I was like, oh, I really like some of the stuff you're doing. Do you want to try and make some music together? And that was literally how it started.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a 1 in a million, man. I mean, if you translated that into, like, if we adjust for inflation, if you translated that to 2019, that would be, like Skrillex coming into some 12-year-old's bedroom in the States.
Yeah, I mean, Dougal really is like a legend.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No hyperbole. And just thinking about that, man, what are the odds? That's such a crazy connection.
He was like, at one point, back in like the Prodigy golden days, he was their tour DJ. That's how...
I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's how legendary he was. He won I think he won an MTV award or was nominated. He's very influential in the rave scene.
Yeah. And it's funny too. I'm jumping around a little now, but I was thinking about this earlier today. UK hardcore or old school hardcore or happy hardcore, whatever you want to call it, to me, it always felt like this underground thing that I've mentioned. It felt like there was a ceiling on it, especially in the States. But it's funny now for us in 2019, looking at the music that's being made, particularly in the States, and I see so much influence from that music in what's being made now, especially, in bass music.
Yeah.
A lot of the old rave stabs and the pianos that you mentioned, some of the chord progressions, the way samples are being used. It's really interesting to me. Like, have you noticed that? Is that something?
I've absolutely noticed that, and I'm obviously super thrilled about it.
Yeah.
I mean, look at it, the Snake and Snake and Eptic, the old stab sound, that influence is like completely undeniable.
Right.
That's like Prodigy all over. Porter Robinson has like Virtual Self rather, has like that 2005, 8-ish, those sort of rich UK hardcore chords. I've heard, I think there's like a Pegboard Nerds track with like this real happy piano in it. And I'm like, that sounds like Brisk straight away. And even like, Joyride just reminds me of like the older Speed Garage. What Alert's doing now is like the golden days of Hard House.
Absolutely.
I'm really happy about this because it's like resurrecting those sounds I grew up with.
Yeah, absolutely.
In a refreshing way.
Yeah, I mean, does it feel to you like maybe the U.S. is finally catching up to something you already kind of knew? Because I have to imagine at a certain point there must have been... Well, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but if I was in your position, I think I would feel some frustration at a certain point of, I know this is good, but it's not translating for some reason. And then now to see it sort of connecting with people, do you have an idea maybe why that is? Have you thought about that?
I think I used to feel frustrated, but I mean, there's two sides to an idea. There's the idea and execution, just because I might have had the big, rich rave synths, for the American market, some of these songs I was playing might be 7 minutes long, and that's just, there's always been way too long. At first I felt frustration, but now it's like complete gratitude because it's, this is a sound I love, and if everyone else loves it with me, this is just great. And it has also, I can't deny, it's also opened doors for me. I mean, first time I heard I'm going to go back Porter again. Porter Robinson's Sad Machine. It was essentially an up-tempo track with a halftime drop.
Right.
And I tweeted him jokingly like, hey, do you want a happy hardcore remix of Sad Machine? And then he sends me the stems. I do it with Darren Stiles, who's one of my good friends, because I'm like, I want this to be as good as it can be. And that track single-handedly like started our boom out here.
Right.
So...
I remember when you dropped that, man.
Yeah. So them referencing us and us referencing back, it benefits everyone, and I don't ever want to be that guy who's like, man, I was doing this first.
Right, of course. Have there been any other surprising artists, people you wouldn't think are into that kind of sound that you ended up finding out actually they're big fans of what you do?
Oh, God, there's been so many. You, just now I found out.
100%.
Kill the Noise was another one.
I could see him really being into that, actually.
Audion was another one. There's been a bunch, man.
Yeah.
You meet these people and that I go up to them and I'm like, man, I'm such a big fan. And then they turn around and go, oh, I grew up listening to you, Gammer. And I'm like, what the fuck?
That's amazing. Well, and I think not the first time, but one of the times I heard your music was another former hardcore DJ, AC Slater.
AC Slater, yes. And he actually, I released a song on a vinyl and he was the other side of it as
really?
AC Slater, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Was it through his like Pitched Up label back in the day?
I think it was through one of Sharky's labels. Was it Chaotix?
Yeah.
And then I saw, like, a few years later, a house guy called AC Slater, and I'm like, this can't be the same guy.
Well, yeah, I think he's I've had him on this show. He's a little embarrassed of his hardcore days. Like, he'll probably be a little mad that I brought it up. But I remember I was asking him, because I was like, I knew him back in the day when we were both DJing hardcore. And I was like, yeah, man, I feel a little disconnected. Do you know what's going on in the scene now? And he was like, well, not really, but there's this guy, Gammer, and he played me a bunch of your stuff.
No way.
And I was like, whoa, this is like the next wave. And
that's crazy. That's nuts.
How did it evolve for you, man? You know, once you're working with Dougal, kind of an inspiration to you, was it sort of just off to the races at that point? Did it take you a while to become known in that scene?
Yeah, so, you know, I started making songs with Dougal, and at a certain point, I then started making songs on my own. And for the first, 5 or 7 years, that's just how it was. You know, there were regular albums, regular releases, and plenty of shows, and we just ticked along doing that. And then where things really started, where they turned the corner for me was, which mixer was it? Is it the Pioneer DJM 800 came out? And suddenly there was a shift in DJ culture at the time. It wasn't the controllerism stuff that you see now.
Right.
But I happened upon a guy called James Zabelia.
Okay.
And then there was Kutsky. And the main one is a hard house DJ called Andy Whitby, who would you'd watch him play, and what he could do with literally 2 CDJs and a mixer, he'd turn the crowd inside out. You know,
right.
I've never heard cheering like it, because he'd do these double drops, and he'd do things with the delay effect on a mixer where he'd repeat bass lines and do all this crazy stuff.
I love that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and even though it was all technical, it still translated to the crowd, especially if you could see what he's doing. His hands are going all over the place. Yeah. I wanted to be a DJ before I wanted to be a producer. In fact, to this day, I'm way more passionate about DJing.
Me too.
I'm actually making music.
100%.
That's where the joy is. And so it kind of changed my approach to even making music, because I'd make music with the dance floor in mind, and what would get a reaction, and how can I make an edit where I could chop it up with this. And then also I started doing videos for YouTube. I was working closely with an MC who's still a good friend of mine called MC WizKid, and we'd, play with the crowd and do lots of concept stuff. And it just really took off from there. I mean, we used to have a yearly award, the Hardcore Heaven Awards, and I won Best DJ for 6 years in a row.
Oh, I'm well aware, my friend. And I mean, to put it in context for the listeners, I mean, that's more or less like the Grammys of happy hardcore, right? Yeah. There's no higher sort of accolade, right, in that scene.
Yeah, at the time. I mean, for the hardcore scene, it was a big deal, I guess, at the time.
Yeah.
And I was just super passionate about it, and I just kept that going.
Was there ever any thought, I mean, you mentioned that your mom was a raver, so I have to imagine her son becoming a successful DJ made more sense than if she had some other interest, but did you always look at it as, I want this as a career?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Even from a young age.
Before I even knew what DJing was. I think 5 years old, and I knew I wanted to work in music somehow.
Really?
Yeah.
What do you mean 5 years old? Is that
I remember
connected?
listening to Michael Jackson at 5 years old, and Peter Gabriel, who I'm sure no one listening to this is going to know who it is. And I'm like, this makes me feel good. I want to make music. Wow. And that was it. Just set on that.
Yeah. That's so funny, man. Michael Jackson, for me, I mean, I guess a lot of people were turned on to music by Michael Jackson, but that was the first big one for me too, where I felt, it just felt different. It connected with me in a deeper way something about it that, it's like it unlocked a part of my brain that I didn't know was there.
I mean, there was a lot of soul in his music, you know.
Oh, man.
And it would be great. I'd sit there with my Walkman. I'd listen to a song and go, that was great. I'm going to listen to it again. And then you sit there for 2 minutes while you rewind the tape. And then go, hope you got it to the right place.
Well, that was the tapes, you mentioned that was one of my first exposure to overseas rave culture was, at the US raves, they would sell mixtapes. They were just live recordings from like UK events. And so I'd get these cassettes, right?
Yeah.
And you'd listen and you'd hear the whistles and the air horns.
You'd always hear it fade in at the start. You'd always hear the whistles just fade in. Yo, hold tight, 1 2 1 2.
Oh man.
And it was off.
Yeah,
That's it.
And that was it. And I would rewind to hear certain songs.
Yeah.
And there weren't always track listings. I mean, it was the same. There was that excitement of discovery. And it's that same feeling I got when I heard Michael Jackson for the first time as a kid. It was just like, what is happening?
Yeah.
Like
But that's like the essence of music, it's supposed to make you feel something.
Yeah.
All these tones and vibrations coming together just right. And that's when you get like the goosebumps.
It's are you, this might sound like a weird question, but are you a spiritual person at all?
These days, only like very recently, weirdly, only extremely recently.
Well, what do you mean by that?
I wasn't spiritual and then I was.
Well, I guess I'm asking what spirituality do you now?
Spirituality
if you didn't
is,
have it
how do I
before?
sum it up in a word? Would it sound cheesy if I said like a belief in a power greater than myself?
No, not at all. Not
Something
at all.
like that.
Yeah, that's because for me, I'm similar to you. I mean, I was raised Jewish, but I was always a terrible Jew, and I was never religious at all.
I'm a tour manager just like nodding at you.
Yeah, I got you. Yeah, Jewish. Yeah. For me, I took a lot of pride in the history and the ancestry, but the actual religious component I kind of didn't care about. But all that is to say, for me, and especially as I get older, music is kind of what makes me believe in spirituality. And you talk about a power greater than yourself. For me, that is sort of the connection I feel when you're playing a song to a room full of people and that moment is right. Yeah. Whatever that moment is, that to me is that connection, It's
kind of like, it's a kind of synergy that you could never manufacture.
Right.
It just happens.
Yeah, and it's the same way when you were talking about making music, that you can never predict when the inspiration is going to hit or when you're going to make the perfect song, and then it happens, and it's sort of like, what, did I do that? Or, because I don't even, half the time I don't remember it happening, but it happened. It's a weird thing. But all that is to say, it's the same thing I felt, listening to Michael Jackson or listening to The Prodigy early on, that kind of thing. And it's kind of the only thing, tell me if you agree, for me, outside of obviously family and that kind of thing, it's the only thing I've felt pretty much my entire life that made me feel that connected to the world.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
Completely agree with that.
It's a weird thing, man. Do you think about that? I think as I get older, I think about that more and more of like, what is this? Like, what we do is very weird. Like, it's an absurd job, but then it still holds so much meaning for me.
I remember Dougal's really into the spiritual stuff, and he was explaining to me how music works, and he says it goes back to like a tribal aspect of like how music was used to connect people within a tribe, and that's like almost like the ethos of music. And that's, for me, is what's great about music. It's the way it connects us, Yeah. The World's album makes me feel a certain way, and I know I can instantly share that feeling and emotion, and the only people that would understand me is other people who also felt that way about the World's album.
Right.
And that's great because we all share this. I guess it's like a connection.
Yeah. It's an unspoken language too, right?
Yeah.
It's not to make another Porta joke language, but but it is, right? It connects people across cultures and, whatever, like physical barriers, geography, all of that. We're all kind of connected.
I'd even use I know it's a complete flip side, but I'd even use Kanye West as an example. Mm-hmm. Anyone who gets his music, and I feel I do, we all hear that message or feel what it is he's trying to convey, and we all share that thing.
Right.
I use it less as an example because I know Kanye fans tend to come off as a bit
well, he's polarizing, especially now.
I'm not the biggest fan these days, but I mean,
Right.
you know, I'm not gonna, you know, the Dark Fantasy album just completely changed the way I approach music.
Oh, it's unbelievable, man. Yeah, that album, Yeezus, for me was another sort of
Love
game changer.
Jesus.
Yeah.
And it was like so weird, but I instantly got it.
Right.
I'm like, I don't know what it is. It's just that it's just, even though it's like dark and it's not particularly emotional, there's still some kind of emotion in there.
Absolutely.
You know?
And then that's the thing with Kanye. I mean, my take on Kanye is that, I mean, he has mental issues. Like to me, it's a mental health issue more than anything else. But you can't deny that he has that connection to whatever this deeper thing we're talking about is, and he's more connected than a lot of people out there. And so anything he puts out, I'm going to check it out just because I respect his abilities.
Absolutely.
You know? And beyond that, I mean, I agree with you. I'm not a fan of the new album. I'm certainly not a fan of the new Christian conservative Kanye, but you know, that to me is more on the mental health side of things, and I try to keep that separate from the actual music.
Yeah, of course,
as much as I can.
Yeah.
But it's hard. I mean, we talked earlier, right? It's hard to separate yourself from your work, and so
that's something I've struggled with for a long time.
Really?
Yeah, a long time. Like if we want to go back to like the Gammer 1.0 thing, you know, it's all well and good that I was winning awards and doing all this cool stuff, but it completely, like, the toxic nature of it spilled into my personal life, because it's all that because, like, up until very recently, I've always, like I said, I was picked on at school. I've got a lot of self-confidence issues, and this career, being Gammer, was the only thing that gave me a sense of worth. So if I didn't actively go out and say, hey, vote for me on these awards, but anyone close to me would know that it meant so much to me. If I don't win, who am I? What have I got left?
Right.
Even like into like my marriage, it was like, I'm the provider. This is important. I've got to be this guy, otherwise we have nothing. And now I know that's all just bullshit, man.
Absolutely. You know? But no, I relate really strongly to what you're saying, because I
feel like a lot of DJs go through it, especially a lot I speak to. You get the young success, and suddenly it becomes your being, and it is really hard to like separate the two. It's not easy.
It's not easy at all. But over a long career, of course, there's going to be ups and downs for anybody.
Yeah.
And when those downs come, especially the first time they come around, it can be
rough.
Really hard. And what you said about your relationship too, I can relate to that, because, you know, there's a certain sense of pride I always took in what I was doing with my own career. And I've had those downs too. And when that happened, I was like, you know, my girl didn't care. She liked me for who I am, hopefully still does. But for me in that relationship, it was hard to still feel like I was as valuable, you know?
Yeah. And you're sitting there watching a movie, and in the back of your head, you're thinking, I should be in the studio. I should be doing that. You look at Instagram, someone's done something. I should be doing that.
Oh, fuck.
End of the day, you know, your mum, your dad, your missus, your kids, they don't care about your DJ career. They just care about you.
Right.
You know?
Exactly. Yeah, it's a weird thing, man. And it's interesting. Well, first of all, you know, winning those awards 6 years in a row. What was the award? Best top DJ?
There was a few. There was like best hardcore DJ, best producer.
Yeah.
There was a bunch.
Yeah. But like best, you know, you were winning these awards. First of all, what was it about you that you kept winning year after year, do you think? And I'm giving you license to pat yourself on the back.
I would absolutely break my back and stay up all night working on sets, routines, scratches, stuff like that.
Right.
To an unhealthy degree. You know, it was just everything.
We should mention, too, the live component of your sets. I'm sure even back then, it's pretty intricate, right?
Yeah, especially then. You know, the way the music was structured, very formulaic. So I do a lot of like the double drops and the chopping with the basses and stuff like that. And no one else was really like doing that.
Yeah.
And
not
also
at that
like
speed, man.
You know, good track selection. I do a lot of, make loads of bootlegs, which, I guess helped. And I'd, work closely with WizKid.
Everybody.
And it just felt like it was all that meant anything.
Right. Well, and again, that's that insular little scene, right? Is everyone cares so much about the little details of this little world.
Yeah.
Which it's beautiful, but then it's also dangerous that way, I think. And
Absolutely.
and were you touring much outside of the UK? Was there a scene in Europe?
Nah, it was all UK, honestly. I had the occasional gig here and there, but it was all UK. It was every weekend.
Right.
You know, sometimes I'd drive down to the arse end of the country, which would take 5 hours, and then drive straight back again. No hotel. You know, it wasn't easier to manage when you're younger, but it wasn't the most healthy lifestyle then, you know?
Of course. Yeah. And it's interesting too, because the UK, did it ever start to feel small to you? Because I have to, you know, I'm lucky that I had started my career in the US where there's 80 million places you can go DJ. But in the UK, and especially for a specific subgenre like hardcore, I have to imagine there are only so many places you could go before it started to feel like...
Well, here's the mad thing. The ravers traveled as well.
Okay.
So I DJ in one place one night, and then the next night I'd DJ 150 miles away, and I'd see the same people. But it was just normal, you know. Right. That's just how it was. It's when the people stopped traveling, that's when it started to feel small. You know.
We're talking about, you know, at the end of those 6 years, that's what, the late 2000s?
When was it? 2013, 14, I think it was.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It was 2013, 14 that you were still winning the...
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so then that was coinciding as you were winning those awards. That was coinciding with the rise of EDM, quote unquote, in the States.
Yeah.
Did you notice that? Do you remember when you sort of realized that, hey, something's going on over there that's a little different?
Well...
Or were you kind of tunnel vision in that world?
How do I explain this, man? With all genres of music, with anything in regards to music and nightclubs and raves, there's always like, there's a fad element to it, you know?
Yeah.
And I don't say this, I don't want to sound like a boomer saying this, but like once upon a time in the UK top 10 charts, believe it or not, Cascada and Scooter were like getting #1 records,
right?
And like Crazy Frog, you know, it was just a slower version of our music, and because of relationships with the labels and the artists and some of the albums, we had a lot. Names were crossing over, you know. Darren Styles was crossing over into commercial territory. You'd get a Cascada remix in the happy hardcore territory. At that point, that was when it was booming the hardest, you know. The Clubland albums were charting really high. You know, they were charting higher than like a lot of big popular radio acts at the time. And so that's when we saw a surge in nightclub turnout, right? Then Chase and Status and Pendulum happened.
Yeah.
Nobody wanted hardcore anymore. People wanted drum and bass. So all the sort of quite unquote cool people. And again, I'm not saying this to be mean.
Yeah.
They were the first to go. That's where the first drop off happened. Suddenly the music's not cool. And we held on for a long time after that, but it just, you know, and then Skrillex and Calvin Harris came along. Festivals became popular. You could spend less for a ticket and see more acts. And the festivals, they didn't want us. You know, they just didn't want us. They thought we were too alienating, too corny, and that's fine.
Right.
And it just slowly over time just went down. You know?
What was that experience like for you? Were you sort of trying to keep it going at the time, or did you have a moment where you made a conscious decision that I'm going to try something else for the first time in a while?
So this sort of shrinkage, that I don't know a better word for it, the sort of decline, the fall off, it happened over a space of like years and years.
Of course.
A long time. What happened? It was a cocktail of things that happened. I'd always liked Kanye, but I discovered the beautiful Dark Fantasy album. Yeah. And then randomly, I discovered trap music. Now, I didn't know what it was. You know, someone sent me these like Hudson Mohawke records that were like, and a certain Hardcore Vibes remix by a guy called Willy.
Oh, shit.
And I'm like, man, this is like...
I didn't know
this
you
is
knew
like,
that.
Yeah, this is like the music I like, but cool. But I couldn't really play that in my sets. Because I tried it and it was just too different for people, which is fine. And just, I started discovering all this music, and I really got into like hip hop and halftime stuff, and then dubstep and all this stuff. And those kind of coincided over the space of quite a few years. Whenever I upload a mix online, I'd always throw some of that stuff in, you know? I guess that sort of helped me with the US audience a bit, but I don't know for sure.
When did you start making it?
Well, my first track was in 2013 under an alias called Geezy, and the track was called Hashtag. It wasn't really anything, it didn't really blow up. But so it comes to around 2014 or 15, and my friend Darren Stiles is like, have you heard of this guy called Kayzo? He's like playing the records off our label. So I checked that out. I made kind of a crossover record called Red Drink Phone Party, which was like inspired from the sort of high speed Carnage, Diplo, Mumberton sort of stuff, which Kayzo came across. Then there was like the Sad Machine thing and a couple of other things, and then we got a Basscon booking, and then I said, hey Kayzo, do you want to make a track together? And we did. People see it as a kind of, Gammer decided he wants more money, let's write a different style of music, but it was all coinciding with a lot of things. The hardcore scene was tiny.
Right.
All my closest friends had all moved on to other things.
Sure.
We've all got families to support.
Well, I was going to say at a certain point, you have to make a living, right?
The downside is, to be frank, the only people throwing parties were like the worst human beings imaginable. So you turn up to parties, you get treated really badly. You're lucky to get paid. I've had like physical threats. I've been shut. I've had all this sort of just straight bullshit happen.
Yeah.
And yet at the same time, I started messing with this kind of hardcore hybrid stuff and met Kayzo and doing this stuff where suddenly it was like, it felt like I could start again.
Yeah.
And so I just did. And it just happened to pick up. So it was never a point of like, I'm going to stop doing this and doing this. I just slowly kind of moved from one to the other.
Right.
The only reason I actually stopped playing the raves was because just some particular people made things so difficult.
Yeah.
I'm talking like putting me on lineups knowing I was out the country and then telling people I was just chasing the money.
Oh, man.
Watching like my old school fan base turn against me online. That in the end, I became so depressed and fed up with it. It's like, I have to step away from this thing. And
I was going to ask you, I was wondering how much pushback you got when you started making, more American
it was a lot,
bass music. Yeah.
That wasn't easy to deal with. That was really like some of who I thought were my closest friends just turned and just treated me different. And so I took the risk and just started again.
Yeah. Well, and it had to have been encouraging in a certain way, too, to find out that there was, after a long career that you've already had, there's a whole new audience that maybe isn't even that aware of what you've already done.
I don't think a lot of people are, though. That's a crazy thing. Like, Gammer's an old project.
Right. I mean, but in a way, I have to imagine that feels kind of freeing, right? I've talked to other people. A good friend of mine is Kurt Flosterdamus.
Lovely guy.
The best dude. And I talk about him a lot on this show, but he went through a similar thing where there was kind of a Floss 1.0, a 2.0, and now he's into this 3.0 version that he's sort of mapping out for himself. But it was the same thing. What he always said was that, when they had this big rise and fall, and then the trap wave happened, and that's the 2.0.
Yeah.
And he was like, we were able to go back and fix a lot of the things we had done wrong the first time. And that experience allowed us to, make such more efficient moves and such smarter moves. Was it at all like that for you the second time around, like coming out here a lot, making a different style?
I mean, I'm straight up, Kayzo helped me so much. He really believed in me. He introduced me to his manager, who is now my manager. He helped sort of, it's been a two-way thing. He helped show me how to properly do social media and what sort, he got me in with some of the other kind of parties and stuff. I also, I still believe to this day I keep the ethos of the sound I've always done. It just might be translated differently. You know, if you do come out and see my set tonight, you'll still see a lot of ravey. I'll play more ravey, uplifting stuff than headbanging dubstep, which I love, but like that's not...
Well, and even the headbanging dubstep stuff that you put out, I do feel like there's that vibe of... it's the way you were describing hardcore earlier. There's like... I can't think of the right word. It's not zany, but it's, there's this kind of like, I don't know, madcap energy. If it's
upbeat, stupid and fun, I like it.
There you go.
That's kind of, that's where even when like, I'm about to release a sort of bro step track, and my whole thing with it is like, let's just make it wacky and fun.
Right.
You get the feedback from a lot of my close dubstep friends is like, it needs to be more modern and like wubby. And I'm like, No, it doesn't.
Right.
You know?
I say all the time, man, I love stupid music.
Yeah.
Like, to me, that's not an insult. If somebody called my music stupid, I was like, great. Yeah, that's kind of the idea.
What's that? There's a Wookiee song. It's called, is it Champagne or Rosé or... Is it Chop It? Chop It.
Yeah.
So you got Chop It, you got like Weeble Wobble by Eliminate, stuff like that. You know, it's neither corny nor cool, you know, it's just fun. And you hear tracks like that and it puts a smile on my face. Like, this is like...
Yeah,
I
agree.
Is the stuff.
And those names are so perfect for those songs, which brings me to The Drop.
Ugh.
Which, to me, that
Kill
is... Well, all I was going to say is that I think that I just love that name for that song. You know, if you're trying to talk about the perfect, there's no more perfect name for an EDM song than The Drop. Like, when you made that, I was like, how has nobody made a song called that already? You know, it's just one of those things. It was right there.
Interesting fact, I wanted to call it Drop This, but I sampled the vocal from one of my own old hardcore songs I did with Recon. That was called Drop This. That's where the vocal from. Other interesting fact, I'll probably get in trouble for saying this, but he is now half of Camel Fat.
Oh, shit.
Like, yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and they're crushing it, you know?
Yeah, they're amazing.
Yeah, that's the guy.
Wow.
Which is funny because it's like, you know, Camel Fat, super cool house music. And then you got like The Drop, what you waiting for? And then you speak to him, you're right, mate, how's it going, lads?
I love DJs with secret hardcore pasts, man. That's one of my favorite.
Yeah, he's had some... I won't delve into it, but he's had like some chart hits and stuff as well. You know, he's a producer who can do anything, and he nails it.
I believe that. When you made The Drop, at the time, was there a thought that this was any different than anything else you were making around that era?
How can I make something as good as Like a Bitch by Zomboy? And I'm not an amazing sound designer, and I'm not shy about using samples. So here I had this like drum loop going and a bass line, and that's when I just stuck the screech over the top.
Yeah.
And I'm like, if I'm going to make dubstep, rather than trying to make what I think other people want to play, why don't I just put my own ravey element on it? And that, I think, worked out for it because it's just...
Yeah, I mean, it was the biggest song at the festivals that year, right?
Did not anticipate that. I mean, it was a demo. It was a demo I gave to Kayzo, and he gave it to Snake. And then I saw Snake opening it with it at Coachella. And the only thing I was thinking was, I haven't finished it yet.
Too late, man.
Yeah, that was that.
Oh, that's amazing. I mean, that must feel great, right? That to me is sort of the stamp that, hey, this 2.0, whatever we're calling it, it's real. It's happening.
It's a bittersweet thing because I can't deny what it's done for me. Then I had like another mental breakdown last year because I'm like, how can I follow this up? And I was trying way too hard to.
Yeah.
And now I've gone back the other way and I'm like, again, the whole thing is I'm supposed to just make music I enjoy for fun. And if other people like it, they like it. If they don't, oh well.
This goes back to the Porter thing again, right?
Back to the Porter. Just make music for yourself.
I think Porter Robinson is sponsoring this episode of this podcast. But yeah, that's the whole thing, right? Is the second you start worrying about following up the last thing you did is the second you kind of lose the ability to do it, right?
Well, yeah, because you go from creating to trying, and although I feel like they're similar, they're not the same. You know, it sound like a real flipping one of them here, but like art is supposed to be expressive, even if what you're trying to make is like absolutely, you know, let's just completely disrespect the rail and headbang till our necks are broken. That's still that's an angry, ravey expression. Right. You know, it's just make what feels good and what feels right. Yeah. And, you know, unfortunately, I think with the track Out With The Old, although I'm really happy with it, I was really trying to pitch that to be the drop too. And I just tried too hard on it, you know, and I lost my way with it. Sure. Yeah. You know, and we've all been there, man. Yeah. Yeah. I tried to make it something rather than just let it be what it is. Right. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And that's, I will emphasize that for any producers listening. That's a really good tip. Is there's so often that you get obsessed with the perfect idea that's in your head and you try so hard to make it happen that
at least for me, I'll miss out on a bunch of other great ideas that have already happened and probably would have been better.
Exactly.
Because I'm just pursuing this thing I'm never going to get to.
We know it too well.
Oh, man. You've been producing for a long time, too. You said you started on Reason.
Yeah.
Well, as a producer, how have you evolved? How is your setup and what you're working on evolved? And how do you think about making music that's different than how you started?
That is a very good question. I try and start ideas as loosely as I can now. I either work on a cheap pair of headphones, cheap pair of speakers, or straight out the laptop speakers. And if I can't get a decent idea going through that in like 30 to 40 minutes, I just sort of give up and walk away from it, Yeah. It doesn't have to be perfectly mixed. Mixing's a separate thing, If you can hear the kick knock and you got a good riff and everything, then I'll take it from there, and eventually I'll go to my home setup, which is like a big monitor, big flipping huge speakers,
right.
and I'll take it from there.
Which is interesting because I don't know if you've experienced this, but a lot of the younger producers I've worked with, right out of the gates, they're mixing every element and, it's all going into the master right away.
I kind of like to mix as I go, but if I get too wrapped up in for me personally, I get too wrapped up in the mixing from the start, I lose myself because I'll sit there, okay, let's pick a kick, and then I'll sit there for the next 40 minutes EQing it, but I'm not EQing it next to anything at all. It's just on its own,
Yeah.
How it's evolved, I don't know. I started on Reason. Then I moved to Cubase until a few years ago. Now I'm on Ableton. I would argue that Cubase has a better mixer, better audio, editing. But especially with the limited time I get these days traveling and being a dad, I can get my ideas down on Ableton so quick.
That's what I always say, man.
It's the best thing suited to a trackpad. On a laptop, you sit there, you open it up, you go, boop. You got an idea going.
100%.
When it's in your head, it's like you got to get it down as quick as you can before you lose it.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And Ableton's been great for me that way too. And I'm the same as you. I try as much as I can to not have a shitty mix, but I'm definitely way more focused on the idea at the start. And again, I'm also not a crazy sound designer. Like I came to this as a DJ first, like you. And so for me, it's always more about, well, what I care more about is the energy of it, the vibe. Because if I can hear the idea in my head, as long as I can get something out there that's almost like a sketch of that idea, I know I can fill it in later. You know what I mean? Coming
up with a melody using like the initial preset of something.
Yeah.
And just working with that. And I'm like, well, if you can get something hooky going with that, if you can come back a few days later and it's in your head or it sounds fresh, then imagine how that sounds when you stick it on like, a 20-layer rave synth.
Absolutely, man. It's the same with working on shitty speakers too.
Yeah.
If you can get it sounding good there, you're all set. It's going to sound great.
I do recommend the iLouds.
What are those?
Massively. The little IK Multimedia tabletop speakers.
Oh, okay.
They're designed for traveling musicians, but I have a setup at home. Incredible. Actually insane how good they sound.
Wow, I got to look into that. I've never heard of those.
It's like a portable NS10. And if you know NS10s are like, NS10s are the best speaker and yet the worst sounding thing you'll ever hear. Right. But it's still the best speaker.
Yeah. The industry standard for shitty speakers somehow.
Do you want to know if your kick's knocking? NS10. That's it. Straight up.
Absolutely. Well, another person, I wanted to come back to this for a second, is another person who I think has crazy mixing and a similar energy to what you do, you mentioned earlier, is Hudson Mohawke.
Yeah.
And I know you and he have a certain connection.
We actually did a song together, which I forgot about until you put it in a mix recently.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Because I saw it's on your Wikipedia, I think, but somewhere on there is that you have a credit on his album.
Yes, yeah. He the track called Shadows, I wrote the melodies for that, and he sort of then took that and made the song. But he also grew up with happy hardcore and knows it all inside out.
Secret hardcore past, man. Although he talks about it a lot. How did you meet him initially?
I think I started talking to him around the time I discovered all that. It was the Tonight stuff, like Higher Ground, and there's a few other sort of unreleased bootlegs you could find on YouTube. And I think I just emailed him, and he just emailed back. And ever since then, we spoke. We still speak.
Yeah,
quite often. He's a super nice guy.
Yeah, he's an interesting one.
working with him in the studio is exactly how you can imagine. It will just throw the most random stuff into the project.
Yeah, super chaotic, I'm sure.
Yeah, but then it's like his stuff is chaotic and all over the place. And I would even say that the timing is off to a point where it's perfect and sounds good.
Of course.
And I've seen him sit there just knocking things out of time. And I'm like, no, hold on a second. Yeah. There was one. Sorry, my tour manager reminded me of something. Here's an interesting fact I'm going to drop on you right now.
Let's do it.
The song Chimes by Hudson Mohawke was used on an Apple commercial. The woof sample on that track is actually me.
Oh, no way.
Because in his original version, it was a sample. And he texted me saying, it's like, because I did a remix of it. He's like, I need to get this woof sample redone, and I just sent him a voice message. So I was like, and he just literally used that, and then a day later, it's on the Apple commercial. I'm like, hold on a goddamn second.
Yeah, hold on now.
Yeah,
should get some publishing on that.
Yeah,
amazing.
Super nice guy.
You know, we've kind of covered a lot of the history. Where are you at with it now? Because I feel like you've just been dropping, singles steadily. They've all been really good. You've, worked with other interesting people. I think another moment for me was when you did that Valentino Khan remix.
Yeah.
That was another one.
That was a lot of fun, that one.
Oh, I love that one. But again, it was, I'd never heard anything that sounded like that, you know? And
that was actually a product of having like a deliberately weird master chain that gives the song the sound.
Really?
The master chain is like OTT and a saturator.
Okay.
No soft clipping or nothing.
Right.
And it just does something to the sound.
It's that happy chaos again, man.
It's that happy. Yeah, it's like I've tried to use the same mastering chain on other stuff. It doesn't quite work, but that's fine.
Right.
I'd say this year has honestly been a slow year for me releasing. I took a step back and I'm trying to figure out. You talk about like the Flostradamus 1.0, 2.0. I feel like I'm going through that myself. Maybe I'm about to come up with 3.0, but it's not like I'm drastically going to change my sound. But here's my thing, right? A two-sided thing. One, as I said, I love DJing. That for me takes priority over creating. I'm not going to force myself to make stuff if I'm not in a creative mood. And two, like, there's a lot of music. If you want the dubstep or the kind of sort of hard styley S stuff with the off bass, it's all covered so well now. Covered so much that I'm like, well, I don't need to make this if other people are making it. So what the hell do I want to make? Right. I don't know what I want to make. I do have an ambient side project that I've been working on for years. I don't think I'm ever going to release that stuff. I'm certainly not going to do a U-turn and pull that. I think it would be like,
you got to send it to me.
I'll send it. Yeah. It's like straight make you cry music.
Yeah.
Carnage used one in one of his videos recently, actually. Yeah. But it's like, and as well as I just haven't been feeling that creative, but it's fine. I haven't forced it. Because if you force it, you just get down in the dumps.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of jamming on stuff at the moment. I think I'm going to stick with the up-tempo rave stuff, though. I think I'm going to bring vocals back into the mix. I miss vocals.
I like that. Yeah, man. That was what drew me in the first time around was, those vocal anthems.
And that's not me dicking on any of the other sounds. I'm just sort of like, it's just been the sit back and figure out what I want to do. Yeah, but it's fine.
I'm right there with you, man. I think a lot of DJs and producers are kind of going through that right now. Well, this has been really fun, man. I could keep talking to you, but I want to let you go chill out for a while. Is there anything we haven't covered? Anything else you want to get out there? Let the people know.
Yeah, I don't know when this podcast is going out, but on the it's the 13th today, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, on the 14th of November, I'm dropping my new single, Bro Step Strikes Back.
Oh, so like tomorrow?
Tomorrow, yeah.
It'll be out by the time
it's a very clear ode to that sort of older Skrillex Must Die sound, with the real screechy riffs. And some other influences, like I'm a big fan of Justice.
What's it called again?
Called Bro Step Strikes Back.
Okay, nice.
And then on the 14th of December, I'm doing my first headline show at the Palladium. We got a stack lineup. We have Pixel Terry, Yeah, Me Too. We got Dougal. I'm so happy to bring Dougal out. He's going to play happy hardcore bangers. I think it's going to go.
Oh my God, dude.
I honestly think the world is ready for it.
I kind of want to be there. That sounds amazing.
Dude, you should come through, man.
That would be fun.
Come through. I'm putting my entire heart and soul into this show right now. In fact, I'm about to go back to my room and keep working on my intro.
Nice.
And obviously, currently, I'm on tour. I don't know what the link is for that, but it's
We'll get it up there.
yeah. And the obvious stuff. Shout out to my mum, my tour manager, my friend Morgan, my kids, my ex-wife, but only kind of. Dougal, Hixie, WizKid, Scott Brown, Hudson Mohawke, Jerry's mum, because she's a good cook. Doesn't quite grasp keto yet, but she's trying her hardest.
This is such a good...
Cooking something in fat is not the same,
This is the perfect UK hardcore shout out outro. Big up the mom, big up the kid.
Big up! Big up. That's about it. Yeah.
I love it, man. All right, final question, and then we'll get out of here. Just looking for a memory, a time in your life, the first thing that pops into your head when music really deeply affected you. When it just, a certain moment, it doesn't have to be significant, but kind of just the first thing that pops into your head.
This is one of those things I always know the answer to until it's asked of me. Don't Give Up by Peter Gabriel and Kate Bush was the first song that ever made me bawl my eyes out. That was the first time music felt like genuinely special to me.
Right. How old were you? Do you remember?
God, not that old at all.
Yeah.
That's probably the one.
What is it about that song that you think connected with you?
I mean, the song, how I took it is not what the song is about. The song's about the desperation that comes with the economy crashing and things like that. But it was just it's just really sad and emotional. You got the husband or the boyfriend who's saying, there are no jobs. I'm straight up gonna tie a rock to my ankle and jump off a bridge. And then you got Kate Bush as a partner who's really trying to say, don't give up. It will get better. And it's just such a polarizing thing.
Yeah,
it's a powerful song. I actually can't listen to it now for that reason.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. I know that song, but when you went through that description, I was like, oh yeah, that's that's deeper than I remembered it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing.
Peter Gabriel, man, I really need to see him live before he kicks a bucket.
I feel like he's primed for a happy hardcore remix.
Oh, I love Peter Gabriel so much. So much. No one knows who he is. I say it to people, they're like, who the fuck is that? I'm like, Sledgehammer, motherfucker, come on.
And they're like, okay, boomer.
Oh, no! All right.
I had to do it.
It's been a pleasure, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, man. This has been great.
It's been great.
Peace.
Peace.
All right, that's the show. Shout out to Gammer. Thanks for sitting down with me, man. I had a great time. That was super fun. For everybody out there listening, I hope you liked that. I hope you could tell we were having a blast. And don't forget, if you're in Los Angeles, this Saturday, December 14th, Gammer is headlining the Palladium. He's got a stacked lineup, a crazy production. You just heard him talk about how much work is going into that show. So don't miss it if you're in LA. Go grab his new music. The titles I just love so much. Bro Step Strikes Back and EDM Sucks, which is the new one with Showtech. Gammer's got a lot going on. I love that guy. My name is Willy Joy. You can keep up with me at Willy Joy or at Back to Back Pod. You can also reach out to me directly. backtobackpod@gmail.com is the email address. That's it for me for this week. I gotta go. I gotta pack up. I'm about to fly out to LA myself. Gonna spend a week out there, record a bunch more of these, have some secret meetings about things I'm not going to tell you about yet. And look, I just hope everybody has a good holiday season. I'll talk to you before that, but just want to put those vibes out there. Take care of yourself, take care of the people around you, and I will talk to you next week. For Back to Back, this is Willy Joy. Peace.